Most beginner knitters quit within their first 3 projects, and it is almost never because knitting is too hard. It's because nobody ever tells them the 7 specific mistakes that quietly sabotage nearly every new knitter. Mistakes that have nothing to do with talent and everything to do with information. Nobody bothered to hand you before you picked up the needles. I have watched hundreds of beginners fall into the exact same 7 traps, in the exact same order. And today, I am going to hand you the shortcut past every single one of them. Here's the promise. By the end of this video, you will know exactly why your stitches look uneven, why your project keeps getting tighter as you go, and why that one mistake at number 1 is the real reason most people fold up their needles and never pick them back up. Number 1 is not what you think it is, and it is the mistake that ends more knitting careers than all the others combined. Before we get into it, hit subscribe. This channel exists to shortcut the learning curve for people who want to actually finish what they start, not spend 6 months white-knuckling their way through a scarf. If you're serious about this craft, you want these fixes now, not after you've already thrown 3 unfinished projects in a drawer. Let's rank them, from annoying to absolutely project ending. Number 7, skipping the gauge swatch. Every beginner does this. You get a pattern, you get your yarn, and you cast on immediately because swatching feels like busy work standing between you and the actual project. Here's what actually happens when you skip it. Your gauge is off, your finished piece comes out the wrong size, and you don't find out until you've already knit half a sweater that now fits like a poncho. A gauge swatch is a 4-inch square that takes 10 minutes. It tells you whether your tension with this specific yarn and these specific needles matches what the pattern designer used. Skip it, and you're not knitting the pattern anymore. You're knitting a different pattern that happens to use the same instructions. The fix is almost insultingly simple. Knit a small square, measure it, and adjust your needle size up or down until it matches the gauge listed on the pattern. That's it. 10 minutes now saves you 10 hours of frogging later. Do this once and you'll never skip it again, because you'll remember exactly what it felt like the one time you didn't. Number 6, buying the wrong yarn and needles for the project. Beginners walk into a yarn shop, fall in love with a gorgeous mohair or a slippery bamboo yarn, and buy it without asking whether it actually suits what they're trying to make. Fuzzy yarns hide your stitches, which sounds forgiving until you realize you can't see your mistakes to fix them. Slippery yarns slide off your needles the second you look away. If you're learning, you want a smooth, light-colored worsted weight wool, or wool blend on straightforward needles. Nothing fuzzy, nothing dark, nothing so fine you need a magnifying glass to see your own stitches. Your first few projects are not the place to prove you can handle advanced materials. They're the place to build muscle memory with yarn that shows you exactly what you're doing, right or wrong, in real time. Pick boring yarn on purpose. Save the beautiful mohair for the project you make after you've already learned to read your own stitches. Number 5. Knitting in a death grip. This is the mistake every single beginner makes without realizing it, and it's the one that makes your hands ache and your fabric look wrong. New knitters grip the needles like the yarn is trying to escape, pulling every stitch tight out of nervousness, not technique. Tight knitting isn't just uncomfortable, it actively fights you. You'll struggle to slide the needle into your own stitches, your fabric will come out stiff and small, and your hands will cramp up after 20 minutes. Here's the actual fix. Let the needle rest lightly in your hand instead of clenching it, and let the fabric you've already made support the live stitches instead of trying to control every single one with your grip. Loosen your hold until it feels almost too loose, and you'll probably land right at the tension you actually need. This one takes conscious practice to unlearn, but it's the single biggest jump in comfort most beginners ever experience. Number 4, losing track of your stitch count. You start a row with the right number of stitches, and somewhere in the middle you either gain one or lose one, and you don't notice until 3 rows later when your pattern stops matching what's on your needles. This happens because beginners aren't counting as they go. They're just knitting and hoping. The fix has 2 parts. First, count your stitches at the end of every single row until it becomes automatic. Second, use stitch markers to break your row into sections. So if you do gain or lose a stitch, you know within 10 stitches where it happened instead of hunting through an entire row of 120. This is one of the cheapest fixes on this list. A $4 bag of stitch markers will save you more frustration than almost any other tool you own. If you're noticing a pattern here, that every one of these mistakes is fixable in minutes once you actually know what to look for, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It helps this video reach the next beginner who's about to make the exact same mistake you just avoided. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of shortcut we post every week. Number 3, twisting your stitches without realizing it. Twisted stitches happen when you wrap your yarn around the needle in the wrong direction, or insert your needle into the back of the stitch instead of the front. The result is fabric that looks slightly off, stitches that seem to lean the wrong way, and a nagging feeling that something's wrong even though you can't quite name what. Beginners often knit an entire project this way because nobody ever showed them what a properly seated stitch looks like versus a twisted one. The fix is learning to actually look at your stitches. A normal stitch has its right leg in front of the needle, and if you see the left leg sitting in front instead, that stitch is twisted. Once you train your eye to spot this, you'll catch it within a stitch or two instead of an entire row. This is less about a single fix and more about building the habit of reading your knitting instead of blindly following motions, which, as it turns out, matters more than almost anything else on this list. Number 2, panicking over a drop stitch and unraveling the whole project. A drop stitch looks terrifying to a beginner. You glance down, see a hole with a loose loop dangling below it, and your instinct is to assume the entire project is ruined. So you rip out hours of work rather than deal with what looks like a disaster. Here's the truth. A drop stitch is one of the easiest mistakes in all of knitting to fix. You don't need to unravel anything. You need a crochet hook in about 90 seconds. Pick up the drop stitch from the ladder of loose strands below it, work the hook back up through each rung, and place the fixed stitch back on your needle. That's the entire fix. The real cost of this mistake isn't the drop stitch itself. It's the panic that makes beginners destroy good work over something a $5 tool solves in under 2 minutes. Keep a crochet hook in your knitting bag at all times. You will need it, and when you do, you'll be glad you didn't rip out 3 hours of progress over nothing. Number 1, never learning to actually read your knitting. This is the mistake underneath every other mistake on this list, and it's the real reason most beginners quit. New knitters treat knitting as a set of hand motions to memorize instead of a fabric to understand. They follow instructions row by row without ever learning what a knit stitch looks like versus a purl, what their row count should look like at a glance, or how to tell if something's gone wrong before it's 3 rows too late. When you can't read your own knitting, every single mistake feels like a mystery you need someone else to solve, and every fix on this list stays permanently out of reach. The fix is a shift in how you approach the craft entirely. Slow down on your first few projects and actually look at what each stitch produces. Notice the little V shapes of a knit stitch. Notice the horizontal bumps of a purl. Check your work against the pattern photo every few rows, instead of only at the end. This single habit is what separates people who knit for 6 months and quit from people who knit for the rest of their lives. Because once you can read your own fabric, every mistake on this list becomes something you catch and fix in seconds, instead of something that ends your project. If you made it this far, you now know more about avoiding beginner knitting disasters than most people figure out after a full year of frustrated trial and error. The real thesis here is simple. Knitting mistakes aren't a talent problem, they're an information problem, and now you have the information. Smash that like button if this saved you from a mistake you didn't know you were making. Drop a comment and tell me which one hit closest to home. Are you Team Dropped, Stitch Panic, Team Death Grip, or Team Gauge Swatch Skipper? I read every comment, and I want to know which one was you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications, because every week we're breaking down exactly what trips up beginners in this craft, so you don't have to learn it the hard way. Remember this, the difference between a knitter who quits and a knitter who finishes isn't skill. It's simply knowing which 7 mistakes to watch for before they happen instead of after.